Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining the Promark and Scale Computing webinar today. My name is Carleen Edge, Marketing Manager at Promark Technology. Today's presentation will last approximately 45 minutes, and in terms of general housekeeping, your lines have been muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to type your question in the Q&A box on your screen, and all questions will be addressed at the conclusion of the presentation. There will be a drawing after the webinar takes place for your chance to win a Yeti tote bag. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. And now I'll hand things over to Scott Mann, Director of North American Channel Sales. Scott, take it away.
Thank you very much, Carleen, and welcome everybody to another Scale webinar. We have a pretty great attendance here and a really great registration, and I really think that's it's been a direct reaction to the newest system that we came out with. So that's what we're here to focus on today. And our tagline, "Going Small to Get Big," is really in relation to what's happening in the industry. And why this is happening, why all the form factor systems are getting smaller and smaller, and why we're such a great fit and how we can fit on those form factor systems, and then of course what markets and everything that they fit into. So we'll talk. Let me actually get into the agenda first. Actually, there we go. We'll be talking a bit today about those trends in the industry that are driving these changes, as well as our journey that got us to the edge, which is really that big trend in the industry, edge computing. If you're not familiar with edge computing, no worries, we're going to cover that as well. What's really driving edge computing, and another buzz term of edge computing is just the evolution of a trend in the industry, and some of the competitive differentiators that led us into introducing this new HE500 system, which I'll lead off with. It starts at MSRP in USD to your customer at $5,500. So it's a very, very, very cost-effective hyperconverged solution. I would be jaw dropped if I saw anything else out there in the industry that was at the same price as ours, especially with the same functionality and the benefits that our solutions provide. And then we'll walk through the ideal use cases. So there's this big trend in the industry that's happening at the enterprise level. And what's very interesting about that is that it's just benefiting the SMB and the MSP type of a deployment because of this trend. It's kind of a race to the bottom in terms of the size of the system that you can run on. Everything is getting smaller and smaller. You see it on the PC side, now you're seeing it on the data center side, and all that is evolved around edge computing, which is really the basis of it's a trend that's evolving because of IoT. So to really understand what edge computing is, you have to first take a step back and say, really, what is IoT and what's the trend that's happening within IoT? And essentially, IoT is this technology that's running outside of the data center at the remote sites that's increasing the digital footprint outside of the four walls of the traditional data center. So it's increasing the digital footprint at the remote sites, at the branch offices, at the retail, the grocery store, the gas station, where we're using technology to evolve our customer experience, to make our operations more productive, more efficient. And it's requiring us to have these data center-like capabilities where the data center doesn't actually exist, which is really what's driving this edge computing trend. So what's happening with IoT, if you think of the amount of devices and things that are being connected to an edge solution, you can see here that on the graph that there's a pretty substantial increase year over year in the billions of devices that are going to be eventually connected to an edge, and we're talking at the end of 2020. So this is not out in the future by any stretch of the imagination. So currently today, around 10% of the enterprise generated data, it's created and it's processed outside of a traditional data center. So it's processed at that remote site, at that branch office. And what Gartner predicts, the top quote up here, is by 2022, that figure will reach 75%. So all this data and all these best practices that we built around the data center, around these four walls of these data centers, these massive companies, these large organizations, now they're seeing a need for, there's data being collected in a different area than where they built all this infrastructure around. So now they're seeing the need to be able to build this infrastructure elsewhere. And if you think of an opportunity from a partner perspective, the expected, the compounded annual growth rate is of 14.2%, is 14.2%. So that's expected to reach 21 billion by 2023 from 10.6 billion today. And actually those numbers, from what I've seen in the last couple of months of new reports that are coming out, that number is growing exponentially. These numbers were really from the start of the year. You look at it 6 months later, and that $21 billion, the expectation has already increased because of how much IoT is being adopted and because of how much vendors and solutions are being created around IoT technology. So the trend of the 2010s was really that cloud computing era where everybody was saying everything is going to the cloud, whether it's private or public cloud. And now what's happening in the 2020s is we're seeing everything decentralized again, while still maintaining that same central cloud computing or private cloud, public or private cloud for their core data center. But now what we're seeing is the evolution of micro data centers at the edge. So micro data centers at these remote sites. They're creating their own little public-private clouds at these small remote sites that need the data center-like functionality, but they can't cost 50, 500, millions of dollars. And if you think of what edge computing is, it's a bridge to the public or private cloud. So it's a high performance bridge between those things that are collecting all that data to the public cloud. And the reason that we need edge deployments, edge computing at these sites is you think like in the retail scenario, for instance, we'll work our way down from the top. In the retail scenario, you're competing against the likes of online competition. So the main differentiator is going to be a customer experience. You need to evolve your customer experience to get your customers out to that retail site, that grocery store, and make them want to come there for that experience. So that, because you're never going to be able to compete against the convenience of being able to go online and go to Amazon and purchase something and get it within 2 hours. So to do that, they're using technology to evolve the customer experience. They're making it a tellerless experience. So there's not necessarily any interaction on a POS system on the way out. When you walk into the store, you can have your whole grocery list, which is tied into the actual mapping of the floor, the floor print of that store. So it'll give you the most efficient way to get to all the items that you need. And then they have new digital signage that's coming out. That digital signage is now catered towards you, the user, because when you walk in there, the IP, they pick up the IP address to your phone, and they have all this AI and machine learning that's happening to create a customer experience for you, so that when you walk up to that digital signage, it's custom catered towards you. It's no longer just a little piece of paper that says 50% off. It's now based on your grocery list, based on your buying habits. They're creating a new customer experience for you. And then you've got things to make the actual store itself more efficient within refrigeration, within the inventory side of it. If you take that item off the shelf, automatically when you walk out, they're going to charge you for that. But once that item's taken off the shelf, they also have sensors to understand what inventory they need to purchase. So all this sounds great, and it's making this great automated experience for the end users, but all of this is creating new technology at those sites. And traditionally at those retail sites, they're not running much. They used to be running non-mission critical applications. Now they're running mission critical applications. They're collecting our data, and all this data, not only does it need to be regulated because it's our data that they're collecting, but it also, they need to leverage that because it's intellectual property. They need to take that data and send it back to the private or public cloud so that they can do the machine learning, they can understand their buyers better, and they can push out new processes to evolve it. So all of these different things are creating these needs for this new data center, right? So now within these edge deployments, they have a new need because there's local bandwidth issues, there's latency issues. They need those things to react on the fly so that they can create this new customer experience. The same thing with healthcare. Healthcare is becoming more and more decentralized. Banking, they're becoming tellerless. You want to be able to, instead of just going on your phone to do banking, they want you to go into and buy their financial services. So it needs to be a tellerless, customized experience for that person in order for them to actually want to go into the branch office. Smart cities, smart buildings, all leveraging technology that's really outside of the four walls of the data center. This technology from the manufacturing perspective, you think in OT. OT is now, operational technology is now coming into the IT purview, so that they have to actually manage some of these things with the technology that's in the machinery that's allowing whatever the end product is to be built on automatically, or in an automated process, I should say. And then the transportation world, we have shipping transportation that goes out to seas for months at a time, and the only communication they have is very infrequent, and they have to put things on different towers that are in the middle of the sea. And those towers need to be redundant, and they need to be able to collect all the data for a long period of time and be able to send that back once it's able to establish a connection, because those connections aren't very secured. So all of this is driving this trend within this edge computing and this race to the bottom that I mentioned. And when you think of what the edge really requires, what these sites are requiring, they require simplicity, because they have no IT staff there. That gas station that's now becoming kind of a super gas station, it has no IT staff. So when you're sending somebody on there to do any break fix or anything like that, ease of use is essential. You need to create essentially a data center as a service, a store as a service, if you will. So something that you can put on-prem there that they don't have to send somebody from across the world or even across the nation, because that travel time and that opportunity cost is substantial, especially when you think that there's tens to hundreds of thousands of sites. And the key within all of this is to have automations that we can keep the systems up. The automation also allows for self-healing to absorb different failures so that if something does happen, they don't need to drop everything and get to it and pay an exorbitant cost to get somebody on site to go fix that. They can wait until Monday when the costs are going to be a little bit lower. They can get that new system on site because they have built-in redundancies, and that system itself, although something may have failed, it healed from it. It was able to react, and it was able to evolve from that occurrence that happened. And then we think about from a deployment perspective, we need to create that store as a service or that infrastructure as a service for all the different sites. So quick deployment is essential. So when you're talking about scale computing and our HC3 product that we can deploy in under an hour, something that you can set up at head office, ship it out, and have somebody local that just needs to basically plug and go and be able to manage all of those sites remotely. Being able to manage the tens, the hundreds, the thousands of sites across a region, across a nation, across the globe from the one central office, so that they don't have to have hands-on at each one of those sites. It's key, which we built in a platform to be able to manage all of those sites out of. And then when you think of the costs of these scenarios, the costs are multiplied by the amount of sites that they're going to have. So if they have dozens, hundreds, thousands of sites, the cost of their resources, their time, the labor that it costs to do these different things, it's just amplified by the amount of sites that they have. So breaking it down into each one here, if you think of an extra 10 minutes of management per site, and we're going to take in a random number of 240 sites, that adds up to 200. That adds up to a 40-hour work week. So an extra 10 minutes of management, each one of those 240 sites, you have to employ an additional employee just to manage all the sites. An extra 4 hours to deploy all of those sites, it's going to take an extra 6 months to deploy it. And when we're talking in an industry where you need to stay agile and you need to stay above the competition, it's imperative to get that implementation done as quickly as possible, because that extra 6 months is the difference of being ahead and behind the competition. And then if you think of a resource perspective, an overhead consumption of the actual system you're deploying, if it's consuming an extra 224 gigs of RAM, that resource overhead per site equals 5.7 terabytes. And all of those equal dollars. 5.7 terabytes across those sites, that's a big difference on your bottom dollar. And then an outage at any of those single sites can cost thousands in lost business now. Now that we're having mission critical applications put on there, AI applications that are being put on there, it's imperative that we have a system that is redundant locally so that they don't have any downtime. And if you really dive into the weeds of what some of these sites are leveraging, like some of these smaller sites like coffee shops and stuff like that, that could be thousands. Think of like a Starbucks that's thousands of sites globally. That's gonna cost them a ton of time and a ton of downtime per site, because they don't have any redundancy built into it. And when that site goes down, they literally cannot operate. Their site's gonna go down, their POS system's gonna go down. They can't take any orders. They can't take any online orders from their applications. They're in a rough situation, and they're losing a lot of dollars per site. And now the journey for scale. This is a slide that I've used quite a bit, but I enjoy this slide because I find it helps articulate our foundation and where we came from to where we've grown to and where we've evolved with the industry, alongside with the industry and the trends in the industry, ultimately leading us to the introduction of this HE500 system. But launching that HC3 platform in 2012, we set out to create a solution that was built for the SMB. But we didn't want to create a Me Too solution. We didn't want to create a solution that was just like the others in the industry that had a lot of overhead. We knew we had to be very different because all the other solutions were targeted towards the enterprise. So when we coined this term hyperconvergence, we first launched hyperconverged solution. We started at the foundation of it all. We had to create a hyper-efficient architecture. And the irony of creating this hyper-efficient architecture is that it can run on these smaller form factor systems. So then all of a sudden, we've gained a lot of traction within the industry over the years since we launched in 2012. We became the largest hyperconverged vendor in the small to medium-sized businesses. Then we ended up getting pulled upstream. And I believe this is not one of, but might be the largest HCI deployments once it's fully said and done. We ended up getting pulled up into these edge computing deployments. So where they have thousands of sites, with these thousands of sites, they're realistically, they're smaller SMB type sites. They're just managed by a massive global enterprise that needs to manage thousands of sites, not only in their country, but across the world. But they need the redundancy, they need the visibility into those sites, they need the ease of management for those sites. That's the exact solution that we built for these SMB customers. And now their pain points are just exasperated when we're talking about the thousands of sites. So Scale became the perfect solution for that. And then we built in all these management features to be able to manage all those thousands of sites from this one central, from the one central head office. And which led into us introducing in 2018 HC3 Edge to our edge computing platform. And then obviously from HC3 Edge, now we have all these features that are built in that are customized for these distributed enterprises. We built in new programs, depending on if it was a managed service offering or if it was an SI offering. And then from there, we have new products that are coming out that are complementing this new solution that we've created, which is what the HE500 is. Now to take a step back on the hyperconverged side, a little bit of kudos on the top right there. If anybody follows us on our marketing, we just won 2 awards: the CRN Annual Report Card winner for Hyperconverged Vendor of the Year, as well as the Virtualization Vendor of the Year. Now both of those awards are pretty substantial for us because it's something that the hyperconverged has never been won by anybody outside of the big names, your Dells, your HPs. And your Cisco's were the 3 that owned it for the last 10 years. And then you think of who owned the virtualization category. It's been VMware for all of those years. So what this says about scale computing is this is something that gets voted on by our partners, and that they go and vote it on different subcategories, being the product itself, the reliability of the product, the quality of the product, the support that the product offers, as well as the partnerships that we offer. And our partners go and they go rate. This goes to thousands of partners across the industry, and they go rate on this. So we won all of the subcategories of those. So it goes to show that the solution that we created in the intended markets that we created it for, it's really resonated with our partners. So any of our partners that are on this call, really appreciate your support for this. This is big things, not just for us, but it's going to be big things for you as well. Now, hyperconvergence itself, taking a step back, because I know there's some new names on this webinar that I've never seen before. So I want to make sure that we really understand what the foundation of HE3 and our solution is. And hyperconvergence, if you think about it, it's the smartphone of the infrastructure world. The smartphone takes a bunch of different functional tools like your phone, your calendar, your emails, and it puts it into one single platform. Hyperconvergence, what we intended it to be, was taking server, storage, and virtualization and put it in one single platform. That's evolved since we first launched it, and now we're talking about backup and disaster recovery that's also included in that single platform. But what we did was we created a solution that was hyper efficient. So instead of adding another software layer on the top like the competitive approach is, what we did was we went down to the core of it, and we said, hey, if we had the opportunity to redefine what the virtual infrastructure actually looked like, now that at that point in time, once we launched, the de facto solution was the traditional VMware solution, for instance, how would we have done it with all the new changes in technology and with everything that we've learned over that 10 years that VMware really dominated? And we really started at that foundation of it all. Instead of adding another software layer on top of the traditional stack, we made it into one single cohesive layer. So these 3 components, the server to the virtualization, I should say the virtualization layer to the storage layer, they can speak directly to each other. So we've eliminated multiple layers within that data path, which add additional overhead. And by not adding another software layer on top of that traditional stack, we've reduced that overhead by just the data path alone. We're a quarter of what the other competitive approach to be. And what that competitive approach looks like is really instead of taking this kernel-based approach that we have, it's taking a physical storage appliance and it's virtualizing it. So there's nothing wrong with that approach, but it's a very enterprise approach because that physical storage appliance, it has a physical controller, which has resources associated with it. It's got CPU and it's got RAM resources associated with it. Those resources don't disappear. Those resources just get moved into the virtual layer. That means that you're losing overhead of those those resources that you typically have because you need to power on this system and because of the architecture that it's been created. And in our world, that overhead is very important because that consumes anywhere from it consumes across the board 4 cores per node. So a 3-node system like you see on the right here, That's 12 cores that you're losing just to power on the system. And from a RAM overhead perspective, you're losing hundreds of gigs of RAM, which in the enterprise world that's a drop in the pan. When you're talking about petabyte of RAM alone, or thousands of terabytes of RAM, a few hundred isn't going to be that substantial. But when you're talking about thousands of sites, or you're talking about an SMB customer that only has 300 gigs of RAM, that becomes a substantial amount, a substantial uplift that you have to pay for just to power on the system. So we knew we had to be hyper efficient with that architecture. And this is what you can see on the side here. So that left side approach, that's the VSA data path. So that's what all the hops that if you take a Word document and you change anything in that Word document is local. It's being installed. It's running on your local servers and not in O365. This would be the data path that everything has to go through. So it's about 14 hops. And then on the right side here, we're quarter of that hop, the amount of data path that has to go through. So from an efficiency perspective, you can see there's a ton of gain within that. And what that means is that we can run on these lighter weight platforms. So this trend in the industry that moved towards edge computing has really benefited us, because 64 gig systems were probably the lowest that most hyperconverged solutions would go down to, because outside of that, we didn't see that there was a need in the S of the market. So 5 years ago, hyperconverged systems would never be lower than a 64 gig single node. And you can see kind of why on the competitive side, on the left side there, that VSA, it's consuming a lot of the available resources just to boot it on. So now if you need more than 40 gigs of resources, you actually have to add additional resources onto that because of that overhead. On the right side, Scale only consumes 4 gigs of RAM. 4 gigs of RAM at max. It can consume less, but we carve out 4 gigs just to say this is going to be how much we're going to consume. If we had to run on a smaller platform, we could carve out less. And this is a fully feature-rich 4 gigs of RAM. On the left side there, the VSA model, that's just their baseline. You add on additional features to that. Those additional features add additional resources. So you're going to end up consuming more than 24. It's going to continue to grow. Now in this edge computing world, what's happening is we're taking a step back and we're going smaller. So now let's look at a 32 gig system. 32 gig system on the left side, you have no space to run anything on. On the right side there with our 4 gigs, that 28 gigs of RAM is enough to run the 4 to 6 VMs that they need in that they need locally on that platform. And there's even going to be other scenarios where 16 gigs times 3 nodes, that's going to be the perfect fit in a small local or a small retail office or something like that, where they're only running those 4 to 6 VMs, and it's employed by 1 or 2 employees on a daily basis. So there's going to be even smaller footprints that we can still run on. And with that 4 gigs, if we clean it up, we can reduce that as well down to 1 gig. We can still run on these 16 gig systems. I've seen a 3-node system, and we were actually just at a show last week, and we had a 3-node system. Each one of the nodes that we were kind of prototyping had a 16 gig, it was a 16 gig node. So 16 gigs times 3 nodes, and each one of them was running, I think it was an i3 processor, maybe an i7 processor. So very, very small compute resource wise. And that was running an infrastructure that we were demoing just to show how efficient we can get with this. And now we get into the HE500 system. So launching this HE500 system, we launched it last quarter. It's been a very exciting system since we launched. It's definitely gotten the most buzz that I've seen out of any solution since we've launched it, because it's so different than everything else in the industry. Nobody else in the industry has an MSRP system that they promote starting at $5,500. And that's both a tower and a rack server. And the nice thing about this system, it's not a light version of anything. It's less resources, yes, but the features, it's a fully featured system. So all the features that you would expect in our larger systems, our HC5000 or HC1000, you get all those features. The dedupe, the backup, the replication, the snapshotting, the cloning, all of that, you still get everything within this platform. And the nice part about it is it's compatible with the HC1000 and 5000. So now when we think that we created the HE, the E stands for edge. So we created the system for this edge scenarios, but what happened was it's actually benefiting a ton of other use cases, because we've created this system that if you had an HC500 system, let's just say a 3-node system deployed, and all of a sudden you have a customer that grew 3x the next year, that's perfectly fine. That HE500 might not make sense to add on to that, but you can add on a 1,000, you can add on a 5,000, add on whatever system meets the resource requirements that they need. So not only are you getting a system that fits them in the price point that they need today, but you're future-proofing them and putting them in a system that's gonna meet their needs in the next 3-5 years as they grow, especially in the SMB world where growth is very volatile. It's very unpredictable because you never know what's going to happen with the market or with that company. It's not like you can predict a 20%, 20-25% growth rate year over year. So you need a system to be able to future-proof them, which is exactly what we can do, especially with this HE500 system. Now, just a quick product overview. So you saw a tower node and you saw a rack node on that last slide there. So these top three ones that you see on the left, the HE500 to the HE550F, those ones are all the rack options. And then there's the T, the HE500T and the TF. Those ones are going to be our tower options. So all of them starting around 5,500. The only one that's different is the hybrid HE500, which starts at 5,580. So you can have everything from on the rack servers, you can have an all spinning, you can have an all flash, and you can have a hybrid. Those are the different CPUs that you have in there. So the RAM options are based on basically what Intel allows us to do with the RAM, the capabilities for it. And I think that's going to evolve as well. So you might see the RAM options moving up a little bit. Networking, 1 gig, 10 gig. On the tower side of it, you have an all spinning, you can have an all flash as well. The really nice thing about that tower one is that it goes up to 8 drives. So if you have 8 drives at 8 terabytes in a single tower, that makes a really, really storage heavy node. And a storage heavy node is the perfect solution for for a remote target. So if you have a 3-node HE500 system and they want to have a ton of offsite storage with the DR capabilities built into that, we can offer the 64 terabyte node, or maybe it's got multiple sites replicating into one site that they're using as a DR site, or maybe that's your offering that the organization is hosting in a colo or your data center for a bunch of your customers. They can have everything replicating into this one beefy node, which doesn't cost an arm and a leg for it. And you're not only providing backup, you're also providing disaster recovery with a 3-click restore, which is very, very convenient. So some ideal use cases for this, these are our 3 markets that we serve well into: the SMB, the distributed enterprises, and the MSP deployments, which is kind of that under 100 seat user. The HE500 fits all of these use cases, and it can be mix and match with the 1,000 and the 5,000. So it just kind of extends out the amount of use cases that we can reach into within these. So in the small to medium business, a lot of customers, even at our very cost-effective starting price point of the HC1000, that might even have been a little bit too much for those customers. So now we've come down another notch down with that 3-node system starting at 16,500. That's with the 30 points of margin baked in it for you, the partner, a very healthy margin, very cost-effective solution for your end user. And it's these customers that need the lower resource requirements. And with that built-in backup and disaster recovery, now you get that single tower node, like I mentioned off-site. That single tower node, it can be another $5,500 tower node, put at a secondary site. Now you're providing backup and DR at a price point that's really untouchable. And of course, this can mix and match with our larger systems. Then you've got our distributed enterprises. So that's going to be those edge use cases where there's tens to hundreds to thousands of sites. They require those quick deployments, the ease of use that we mentioned, and they have no IT staff. That HE500 system could be deployed in any fashion. It can be a single rack node, it can be a single tower node, it can be a 3-node HE500, all replicating into a large cluster of HC5000s, of which I think our largest customer is running around 1.5 petabytes of storage. I'm actually going to get into more of a product overview of the rest of the systems on the next slide. So just to get a refresher, if you will. And then we have the what I call the MSP deployments, where we're talking about under 100 users, where a lot of our systems wouldn't even, they'd be way too large for, even with the smaller size systems that we did have available in comparison to the other competitors in the industry. Now we can get a system that actually fits these users' needs, whether they're replicating it to a secondary site, a private cloud that you're hosting, or we leverage our Google partnership and have them replicate up to the Google Cloud and leverage that as a DR as a service model for them. So we can basically provide on these smaller size customers, we can provide them with the capabilities of what the enterprises get at a price point that they can actually afford, which they're not used to. They're used to getting a light version from these enterprise targeted companies or targeted vendors that give them a featureless solution that they offer. With us, it's everything that they get with it. It's going to be the amount of resources that they require, whether they need redundancy or not, and they can replicate that up to Google Cloud. When they replicate to Google Cloud, it looks like it's just another node in the cloud, but you've got the power of Google and you've got the redundancy of all Google's data centers. So it's also got the built-in layer 2 software-defined networking, so they need to get that up and running. 3 clicks, it's up and running in the cloud, and it looks like it's running locally on their LAN. So it's a very, very convenient way of doing it, especially a very painless way of doing a DR as a service model that can be sometimes very, very intimidating for some of these smaller customers that think that it's going to be too costly for them. This is a great way to get them, especially a foot in the door with them. So looking at the rest of the hardware series, so the HE500, just to kind of summarize all of this, because now it gets confusing of when do I go HE500, when do I go 1000 and 5000? And I guess that the best way to answer that is always defer to your scale regional team. Our scale SEs are going to help you assess any of the environments that you have, whether it's a brand new environment, it's an existing environment. We're going to run an assessment tool. We're going to help put those configurations together. So we'll know what kind of resources it needs. We'll know what the limitations are with these systems. Like if a customer is likely to outgrow the amount of RAM footprint that is allowed within the HE500s based on those processes that it has, we'll put them in the HE1000, put them at a better starting point. Some of them are going to be a perfect fit for the HE500. Maybe they don't have a data center, or they don't have an ideal place to put a rack. We can run that tower node so it can run wherever they've already been running if it's something like a dental office. So we'll help size all of those different systems out and make sure that you get the most cost-effective solution that's also scalable for your end user. But the HC1000, that's still going to be our bread and butter system. That's really going to be anywhere customers that are around 5 terabytes to 50, 60, 70 terabytes maybe. And then the HC5000, that's their bigger system. So that's going to be a great system that is when you have these remote branch offices that are running an HE500 or an HC1000 single node or cluster, and they have everything replicating back to head office. That's where the HC5000 comes into play, because this system can get up to 100 terabytes. I think it's 120 terabytes in a single node. So it can get very, very dense very quickly, and it can run up to 1.5 terabytes of, or 1.5 terabytes of RAM in a single node. So multiply that by 3 upwards. I think our largest customer I mentioned is running 1.5 petabytes of storage on 21 nodes. So we can definitely get very, very dense with the sizing of the infrastructure for your customers. And this one here, so this is, I think I saved everybody 15 minutes, but we'll go through questions after this. I see some questions in the chat. This is I guess our plea at the end here. Partner with us. What we're looking for from a partner perspective is a partner that's equally as committed to us as we'll be to them. We don't expect to go to our partners and have them bring everything to us. Our traditional model is we'll always kickstart a partnership with something that we can bring to you guys, and we're going to put just as much effort into building within your region together. Whether that's a specific brand, whether that's a specific vertical you're targeting after, we can help target it after that with you, and we can leverage our marketing resources, our sales resources, our channel, and our technical resources to be an extension of your team. There's no upfront cost to join on as a partnership, and there's no minimum commitments or certifications. It's literally an agreement that you click accept on, but you're going to get out of it what you put into it. As much as you want to be invested into it, we'll be invested right back into it with you, and we'll kickstart that relationship with an upfront MDF investment, whether it's to grow pipeline, whatever we need to do to get this relationship going. And typically what we see is we get that first customer sold. We'll do some free on-the-job training of installation and migration services, so that you don't need to do all those certifications and have that stress of having to, am I sizing this out correctly? Leverage us. We'll be an extension of your team. And then when we get that first installation, we'll go do that installation with you. And then we'll train you how to do those installation. If you have a services arm, we can continue to do the installations as well. But if you have a particular services arm that you want to train to do installation and migration services, we can train them how to do that on the job. And then once they're up and running, we expect them to absolutely go and do that themselves. If you have any questions, if there's anything specific, I'll answer any of the questions in the windows here as well. But if you want to get connected with your regional team, there's that email at the bottom, channel@scalecomputing.com. Please feel free to reach out to it. I'm always available as well. You can send an email to me directly. My email is smann with 2 N's @scalecomputing.com. Feel free to send anything. If it's a simple question, if you want to get set up with your team, I'm more than happy to help out in any way that I can. With that said, let me jump into the questions here. Do we have any comparisons versus Nutanix, Cisco, and Lenovo solutions? We certainly do. It depends on the scenario. So Lenovo solutions, um, that the Lenovo solutions are more of an OEM solution, so it depends on the particular solution you're referring to, if it's Lenovo Nutanix, for instance. But yeah, Tony, I can definitely get you some information. I'd love to know more about the use case, then we can dive more specifically into it. If it's a VDI use case, if it's the backup solution that you're curious on learning more information about. But we do have obviously our comparative our comparative decks against a Nutanix or a Cisco for sure that we can enable you all with and help you understand the differences between us. If you're selling any of the competitive hyperconverged solutions, I always say that makes a great partner sometimes. In those scenarios, if you are selling it, you're probably focused very much on the enterprise side of things. And that's perfectly fine. So sell those solutions into the enterprise side. I guarantee there's a fit in the market that our solution serves that we can help find and we can help target after together. So by no means, if you're saying I'm selling XYZ companies to cross us out, I would say that's a perfect opportunity to look into us further, because your sales team is already going to understand how to sell that product, how to position the hyperconverged solutions. Now this is just positioning it into new markets and new opportunities for both of us. Who are your distributors, if any? Well, our sole distributor is Ingram Micro. So Promark is a company of Ingram Micro. We've been set up with Promark for ever since I've been with Scale, anyways, and I've been with Scale for about 5 years now. They're a fantastic extension of our team because they'll actually provide some value-added resources within the field that you all can leverage as well. They have a great extension, a team that's very knowledgeable of our solution. So if you have any questions, you can think of them as another extension of your team. They can get us involved, especially if you want more of an agnostic viewpoint on something. Definitely leverage the Promark team. Oh, we got a lot of questions here. Copies of the slides available, most definitely. Dave, if you want to send me an email, if anybody does want copies of the slides, just send me an email, smann, 2 N's, at scalecomputing.com, or that channel alias. I'm happy to send out any slides. I don't think there's anything on here that's proprietary or confidential, so more than welcome to send that out to you all. Can you / do you use AMD? Great question. AMD with the new EPYC processors, we currently don't use AMD, but that's because there wasn't really necessarily a cost benefit or a compute benefit to leveraging AMD processor. These new EPYC processors, and I'm not on the product management side, so I can't say for certain what's going to happen, but they have a very compelling offering. And the OEM providers that we use, they have just launched new AMD solutions. So I definitely see that it could be something that we add on into our product set in the next, who knows, 3, 6, 9 months. But if you have a specific scenario that needs it, I always say, bring it to us. We're very custom catering in the solutions that we offer. So if there's a specific scenario that requires AMD or it's a roadblock and this one customer will only go AMD, don't stray away from it. Bring it to us. Let us bring it to product management. And there's a lot of different things that we can do to get creative. Any plan to support AWS? We have a large number of clients locked into AWS. Any plans to support Amazon? Yeah, I know it's on the roadmap. I don't know how far out it is on the roadmap. And I'd be curious in terms of how they're locked into AWS, because there's still ways that we can leverage it, especially with like those edge deployments. Whether it's a remote site that's running Scale, depending on how they're leveraging AWS, we can still use AWS as a target, for instance. Maybe they're running some workloads in AWS. There's still many different ways to leverage that relationship. So it really depends on the use case. Just if you want to dive into that a little bit deeper, I'd be more than happy to just shoot me an email. I wouldn't say we don't support it right now. From a DR as a service perspective, we don't, but that DR as a service solution is because they don't have nested virtualization right now. So if they came out with nested virtualization, I could definitely see that as being a product offering for us. But currently with Google, the reason that we leverage Google is because they have nested virtualization. They helped us fund the technology to create the solution. So we're basically running a Scale within the Google platform, within their KVM based platform. So if there's anything, I don't know if I covered the question completely. I'm more than happy to answer that in more details, because it could be very subjective depending on the use case you're referring to. Looked on the portal for customer facing presentation, but cannot find one. Is there one? Absolutely. And on that note, we're launching a new partner portal, so a lot of the information on there might be a little outdated because we've been in this process for it's a very big undertaking to launch a new partner portal. So you'll see a new partner portal coming out, and an announcement from us. If you have our marketing alias, definitely make sure that it's whitelisted, so that you're getting the emails from us. And we will be launching that probably within the next 3, maximum 4 weeks at this point. I don't have an exact date on it that I'm looking at, but you'll have a lot more content on there for co-branding, out-of-the-box campaigns, which it's kind of a cliche that out-of-the-box campaigns are good, but we always like to customize those out-of-the-box campaigns. So they're good tools to start with and say, hey, this could be something that we could use, but here's the industry that I'm working with, or here's how we position it to our customers, and let's customize that towards something that works for both of us. And then there'll be a new deal reg portal on there, some really great tools that you can see into how we're doing together, building a plan together, and all of the resources that you can need, from the hundreds of case studies that we have to all of the content and collateral that's both partner facing for your sellers as well as end user facing. Anyone else? Still a couple more. And Tim Wicks, thank you for the shout out. How does server migration / failover work? Does it respond to the same IP? Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a couple of ways to do. I'll do the server migration before the failover, because those are kind of two questions baked into one. So the server migration, if they're on anything else, we can use kind of an any-to-any. We use an any solution. So it's actually Double Take, which is owned by Carbonite now, that we'll leverage. So you can run that on any type of hypervisor. You can run that on a physical box, and what it's going to do is it's going to run a broker. It's going to replicate everything over from the existing infrastructure over to us. Make sure that it's collecting blocks in the correct order. Won't send over blocks unless it's got block 1, 2, 3, 4. It won't go 1, 2, 3, 5. And then once you're ready, once everything's been replicated over, it's literally just a flip of a switch, boots down the existing infrastructure, powers up existing VMs, powers it up on us, and everything's up and running on scale. So very seamless. Everything's done within that, and we can definitely help you. We do tons of these migrations on a weekly, daily basis, so we can definitely help on that side of it. There is also I'm going to call it cold export and import functionality, where you can take a VMDK file and import it into Scale. That does give a little downtime though, because it's not replicated over. You actually have to do the raw export and import. So there are different options, and we always go through those when we're doing our assessments with any of our customers. Thanks, Scott. You are welcome, Joseph. Any other questions or anything? Very fantastic questions. I appreciate everybody who responded to the questions, and all the attendees. I think we had a fantastic number of registrants as well as attendees on this. I'm very pleased. Anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. That's channel@scalecomputing.com, and my email, sman2n@scalecomputing.com. They announced the draw of that. You'll be hearing back from marketing on whoever the winner is for that probably within the next half of the day, if not by tomorrow morning. So be on the lookout for an email from us. And thank you all for your time. If there's any questions at this point, feel free to send them to us. I'm happy to answer them on the fly. If you want any of the slide decks or anything like that, send us over to emails, and we'll get those to you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.